A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
Hi, Herman and Corn. So I'd love to chat today about one of those niche topics that is not something that one thinks about too often, but for those who are in this situation in Israel currently or in the future, anywhere else in the world, I think it will be valuable to have this discussion. So specifically, we're currently sheltering from an Iranian missile attack, a barrage. There's been a number today after a couple of quieter days. We've had 3 or 4 alerts just today. And something that the Home Front Command, Pikuda Oraf, is very clear about is the importance of adhering to the wait periods after the alert sounds and only leaving the protected space when there's an all clear given. In previous conflicts, there was kind of a standard waiting period of 10 minutes. And in this one, it's been superseded like last year. It seems that they're giving these all clear alerts very deliberately, only when they're sure that the threat has passed in a certain system. And of course, we talked about the role of artificial intelligence and AI in actually running the alert system. It's impossible for any human to sit there calculating interception trajectories and probabilities. So there's human in the loop, but a lot of the actual calculations of where to alert when the all safe is alert in practice are machine driven, but human supervised. But I'd love to talk about the actual danger, Herman and Corn, because sometimes you see in the news some photographs of shrapnel from these rockets. And what got me really interested in learning about the mechanics of the ballistic missiles in the last conflict was seeing these videos that the IRGC and Press TV, their propaganda arm, release. You see that these things are the size of buses. They're traveling at multiple times the speed of an airplane. And in many cases, they're going into outer space. So you're talking about something that is flying at vast speed, is huge. And we've talked about how the Israel's missile interception system works and why it's multi-layered. The reason why we have these different arrow systems is not only redundancy, but because it's preferable to intercept in outer space, because none of the shrapnel makes it into the atmosphere in the first place, and it kind of pulverizes. We can do a separate episode about what actually happens to the rocket bits in outer space. But when they do the interception at a lower altitude within the bounds of the atmosphere, shrapnel can fall to Earth. And I'd like to understand exactly the mechanics of that, because we talk about kinetic strikes and kinetic interceptions in which it's purely the interceptors are hitting the rockets. And I guess one would wonder why, if 2 very fast moving objects are colliding in outer space, we have large pieces of shrapnel in the first place. We talked about how they might literally be pulverized in outer space. And sometimes I wonder why is it that when these interceptions happen at a lower altitude, there are sometimes quite big fragments. And when we talk about these shrapnel risk, we often just think of the Iranian missiles, and it's important to remember that shrapnel can be from the interceptor missiles as well. We've got 2 missiles colliding, and I mean the engineering challenges involved in this must be absolutely extraordinary. But I wonder if there's any thought put into that in minimizing the shrapnel, at least from the interceptor, or is that just a physical impossibility? And then when these things are coming down to Earth, I don't know what the typical interception altitude would be if it's not in outer space. You might give us some clarity on that. And then when these pieces are moving towards planet Earth, they must be doing so at an immense speed. What kind of speeds are we looking about? And in terms of damages, we've seen some photographs. I mean, there was a harrowing video on the first Iranian missile launch of a Palestinian man in Jericho literally being killed on the spot from shrapnel. And literally, a rocket fell out of the sky and flattened him and put a dent in the road. So these things are massive. So I'd love to understand a bit more about the actual threats involved here, ballistic missile warfare in this region specifically, but also in other parts of the world where we've seen this. There's a huge risk in the population, I think, becoming complacent. Oh, we've just got the all clear now. And people just saying after 3 minutes, you see people saying it's okay to leave, it's fine, don't worry about it. So I think this might be good from that standpoint as well. We can understand exactly why it's so important to adhere to that waiting period.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn Poppleberry, and I am joined, as always, by my brother and the man who spent his morning reading technical manuals on fluid dynamics just for fun.
Herman Poppleberry here. And Corn, you make it sound like a chore, but when you live in Jerusalem in March of 2026, understanding fluid dynamics is actually a survival skill. We are coming to you from our home office, and honestly, the topic today is one that has been literally hitting close to home lately. Our housemate Daniel sent us a voice note about something we have all been living through recently, which is the reality of ballistic missile threats and the incredible, almost science fiction technology used to stop them.
It is a strange thing, isn't it? We have had a few years now of these massive escalations, from the big attacks in 2024 to the tensions we are seeing today. You are sitting in the living room, maybe having some tea or arguing about whose turn it is to do the dishes, and then the sirens go off. You head to the protected room, the mamad, and while you are waiting there, you hear these massive bone-shaking booms overhead. You know it is the interception systems working. But Daniel's question really gets into the grit of what is actually happening, 20 or 60 miles above our heads. He is curious about the physical reality of these events, the size, the speed, and especially the shrapnel.
Right, because there is this common misconception that an interception is like a magic trick where the threat just vanishes into thin air. People hear the word pulverized and think the missile turns into dust or just evaporates. But we are talking about objects the size of a city bus traveling at several times the speed of sound. Physics does not just let that mass disappear. It has to go somewhere, and it has to change form. Daniel wants to know why, if we have the best tech in the world, we are still seeing huge chunks of metal falling on our highways and in our fields.
And Daniel mentioned those videos released by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and their media outlets showing these missiles. When you see them on the launch pad, you realize the sheer scale. These are not the small homemade rockets we often see coming out of Gaza, or the tactical missiles from Lebanon. These are massive engineering projects. Herman, you have been digging into the specs on the Iranian arsenal, specifically the ones that have been used in the recent waves. What are we actually looking at when a ballistic missile is headed toward us?
Well, if you look at the heavy hitters like the Shahab 3, the Ghadr, or the newer Fatah missiles that Iran claims are hypersonic, you are looking at rockets that can be 15 to 18 meters long. That is roughly 50 to 60 feet. To put that in perspective for our listeners, imagine a 5-story apartment building flying through the air, and they are incredibly heavy. We are talking about a launch weight of 16,000 kilograms or more, that is over 35,000 pounds. Now, by the time it reaches us, a lot of that weight, the liquid or solid fuel, has been burned off during the ascent, but you still have a massive re-entry vehicle and the heavy rocket body itself.
And the speed is the part that always blows my mind. We are not talking about airplane speeds here. We are talking about something that makes a jet fighter look like it is standing still.
Not even close. A typical commercial jet flies at maybe 500 miles per hour. These ballistic missiles, during their mid-course phase in space, are traveling at several kilometers per second. That is, thousands of miles per hour. When they re-enter the atmosphere, they are moving at Mach 5, Mach 10, or even higher. At those speeds, the air itself stops acting like a gas and starts acting like a solid wall. The friction generates immense heat, thousands of degrees Celsius, which is why the nose cones have to be made of specialized carbon composites or ceramic materials just to keep from melting before they hit the target.
So, when Daniel asks about the interception, he is asking what happens when our interceptors, like the Arrow 3, meet one of these giants. We've talked about the multi-layered shield before, specifically in episode 705, but I want to focus on the physics of the hit itself. Why is space the preferred place to do this? Why do we try to catch them so high up?
Space is the ideal laboratory for an interception for a few reasons. First, there is no atmosphere, which means no drag and no weather to interfere with the interceptor's sensors. But more importantly, from a safety perspective, an interception in space, what we call exo-atmospheric, happens so high up, usually over 100 kilometers, which is the Kármán line, the edge of space. At that altitude, most of the resulting debris will either stay in orbit for a short time or, more likely, burn up upon re-entry because the pieces are smaller and have more surface area relative to their mass. Because there is no air in space, you don't get a blast wave. There is no fire. It is a pure kinetic kill.
Let's explain that kinetic kill concept because it is central to Daniel's question and it is honestly a bit terrifying. Most people imagine an interceptor has a big explosive warhead that blows up near the target like a giant grenade in the sky.
That is how older systems worked, and how some shorter range systems like the Iron Dome still work to an extent. They use a proximity fuse to shred the target with a ring of fragments. But for a massive ballistic missile, the best way to ensure the warhead is actually destroyed and not just knocked off course is a hit-to-kill approach. The Arrow 3 interceptor doesn't even carry explosives. It is essentially a high-tech, maneuverable tungsten brick hitting another bullet. The kinetic energy is calculated by the formula 1/2 the mass times the velocity squared. Since the velocity is so high, we are talking about a closing speed of maybe 7 or 8 kilometers per second. The energy released upon impact is equivalent to a massive explosion, even without a single gram of TNT involved. It is like two trains hitting each other head-on at 4,000 miles per hour.
So if it is that violent, if the energy is equivalent to a massive bomb, why don't they always get pulverized into tiny bits? Daniel noted that we still see large fragments falling. We have seen pictures of huge booster tubes or engine components landing in the Negev desert, or even near populated areas in Jordan and Israel.
That is the crucial distinction. A ballistic missile isn't one solid block of metal. It is a complex assembly of stages. You have the warhead at the tip, the guidance system, and then the massive fuel tanks and the engine at the back. In many cases, the interceptor is aiming specifically for the most dangerous part, the re-entry vehicle that carries the explosives. If the Arrow 3 hits the warhead directly in space, that specific part might be turned into a cloud of small fragments. But the rest of the missile, the big empty rocket body or the booster stage that is already separated, might just be broken into several large chunks or even left relatively intact, but knocked into a different trajectory.
And those chunks are still moving at thousands of miles per hour. They don't just stop because the warhead is gone.
They still have all that momentum. Even if you break the structural integrity of the missile, those large pieces are still on a ballistic trajectory. They are still headed toward Earth. Gravity doesn't care if the missile is in 1 piece or 10 pieces. This brings us to the different layers of the defense system. If the Arrow 3 misses in space, or if the target is at a different altitude, we have the Arrow 2, which operates within the atmosphere, the endo-atmospheric layer.
And that is where the shrapnel problem becomes much more acute for people on the ground. When it happens in the air we breathe, the rules change.
Right. When an interception happens in the atmosphere, say, at 20 or 30 kilometers up, the air starts to play a massive role. The fragments are slowed down by drag, but they are also pushed around by high-altitude winds. And because the air is denser, those pieces don't just burn up like they might if they were falling from deep space. They fall as heavy, jagged pieces of aerospace-grade aluminum, steel, and carbon fiber. We are talking about pieces that can weigh hundreds of pounds.
I remember seeing that footage Daniel mentioned. The tragic incident in Jericho during the April 2024 attack where a man was killed by a falling piece of a missile. It wasn't even the warhead. It was a massive section of the fuselage, a booster tube that just fell out of the sky. It looked like a giant metal pipe, maybe 6 feet long. When something that heavy falls from that height, it reaches terminal velocity very quickly, and that terminal velocity is lethal.
It is terrifying. For a piece of shrapnel that size, terminal velocity could be 300 or 400 miles per hour. It is essentially a meteor made of man-made materials. This is why the engineering challenge isn't just about hitting the target, it is about where the pieces go. The defense systems use incredibly complex algorithms to try and calculate the footprint of the debris.
This is where the artificial intelligence comes in that Daniel was asking about. The system has to decide in milliseconds whether to launch an interceptor and where to aim it so that the resulting debris field falls in an unpopulated area like the desert or the sea. Ermin, how does the AI actually manage that kind of math in real time?
The system, specifically the Golden Citron Fire Control Center for the Aero system, is processing data from the Green Pine radar. It is looking at the trajectory and saying, okay, if we hit it at point A, the debris will fall on Tel Aviv. But if we wait 4 seconds and hit it at point B, the debris will fall in the open fields of the south. It is a high-stakes geometry problem solved by AI in real time. The AI is also looking at the wind profiles at different altitudes. It knows that a light piece of aluminum will drift further than a heavy engine block.
But as we have seen, it isn't perfect. You can't control every single fragment, especially if the missile breaks into 1,000 pieces. Some pieces are going to fall where people live. That brings us to the practical side of Daniel's prompt. The wait periods. We are told by the Home Front Command to stay in our shelters for 10 minutes after the sirens stop. A lot of people get restless after 2 or 3 minutes when they hear the booms are over, and they want to go outside to see the smoke trails.
That is the most dangerous form of complacency. People think the boom means the danger is over. In reality, the boom is just the beginning of the shrapnel's journey to the ground. If an interception happens at an altitude of 30 kilometers, that is about 19 miles up. Even if a piece of shrapnel is falling at a high speed, it takes a significant amount of time to travel those 19 miles through the thickening atmosphere.
Let's do the math on that for everyone, because I think people underestimate the scale. If something is falling at an average speed of, say, 100 meters per second, which is about 220 miles per hour, how long does it take to fall 30 kilometers?
Well, 30,000 meters divided by 100 meters per second is 300 seconds. That is exactly 5 minutes, and that is assuming it is falling straight down and is already at that high speed. In reality, some pieces might be fluttering like a leaf. Some might be lighter and stay aloft longer due to wind resistance. The 10-minute rule is there to provide a safety buffer for the slowest falling dangerous debris. You might have a heavy piece land in 3 minutes, but a jagged piece of the casing might take 7 or 8 minutes to reach the ground.
It is a sobering thought. You could survive the missile attack because the defense system worked perfectly, only to be hit by a piece of the very system that saved you because you walked outside too soon to take a video on your phone for social media.
And it isn't just the enemy missile. People forget that our interceptors are also missiles. When an Arrow 3 or a David Sling interceptor hits its target, it also breaks apart. You now have 2 missiles worth of high-grade metal and potentially unspent solid fuel falling from the sky. The interceptors themselves are designed to be as safe as possible. Some have self-destruct mechanisms that try to minimize the size of the pieces. But physics is physics. A 3-meter-long interceptor stage falling from the stratosphere is a deadly object.
I think it is important to mention the engineering that goes into the interceptors themselves to minimize this. I was reading about how some interceptors are designed to essentially disintegrate if they don't hit their target, or to break into smaller, less lethal pieces. But when you are dealing with the speeds required to catch a ballistic missile, structural integrity is a requirement, which means you are always going to have large, solid components like the motor casing.
You can't make a missile out of cardboard. It has to withstand incredible g-forces and the heat of Mach 10 flight. So you are always going to have things like the engine casing, which is usually a very tough composite or metal cylinder. There is no way to pulverize that into dust in the atmosphere. The only way to truly pulverize it is that kinetic impact in the vacuum of space, and even then, as we discussed, it is more about breaking it into a cloud of fragments rather than vaporizing it.
It really highlights why the multi-layered approach is so vital. You want to kill it as high as possible. If the Arrow 3 gets it in space, the risk to people on the ground is nearly zero because the pieces are so high they mostly burn up. If the Arrow 2 gets it in the upper atmosphere, the risk increases. If David Sling has to take it out in the mid-atmosphere, you are definitely going to have shrapnel over a wide area.
And that is why the Home Front Command is so specific about the alerts. The AI isn't just telling you a missile is coming, it is often calculating where the debris will fall and only sounding the sirens in those specific polygons. It is an incredibly precise system.
It is amazing tech, but it also requires us to be disciplined. Speaking of discipline, I think I hear my phone vibrating. I should probably check that. It might be important.
Go ahead, Corn. We can take a quick breather before we dive into the terminal phase physics.
Corny? Corny, sweetheart, are you there?
Mom, I'm actually on the show right now. We're recording the deep dive.
Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't mean to interrupt your little radio program. I just wanted to remind you that I left a bag of those nice organic carrots you like by your front door. I was passing by on my way to the market, and I know you forget to eat when you're busy with your prompts.
That's very sweet, Mom, but we're in the middle of explaining ballistic missile trajectories and kinetic kill vehicles.
Oh, that sounds very complicated and stressful. Are you getting enough sleep? You always look so tired when you're thinking about those big metal things. And Herman, are you there? Make sure he eats those carrots. They're good for his eyesight. You need good eyes to see those missiles coming.
Hi, Dorothy. Don't worry, I'll make sure he gets them. We'll talk to you later, okay? We're almost done.
Okay, dear. Don't work too hard, and stay in sight if you hear those loud noises. Bye-bye, Corny.
Bye, Mum. Sorry about that, everyone. My mother has a knack for calling at the most technical moments. But I suppose it's a good reminder that while we're talking about Mach 10 physics, there's still a world of carrots and markets going on down here.
Honestly, a reminder about carrots is a nice change of pace from talking about re-entry vehicles. But let's get back to it. We were talking about why things don't just disappear when they are hit.
Right. We covered the shrapnel from the missile body. But what about the warhead itself? Daniel asked why we don't always see total pulverization. If the goal of the interceptor is to hit the warhead, shouldn't the high explosives inside just detonate and destroy everything?
That is a great question. In the industry, we talk about a low-order versus a high-order detonation. Ideally, the kinetic impact causes the high explosives in the enemy warhead to detonate. If that happens, you get a massive fireball in the sky, which you can often see from the ground, and the warhead is indeed vaporized or turned into very tiny, harmless fragments. That is the best-case scenario.
But it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes the boom we hear is just the impact, not the explosion of the warhead.
Sometimes you get what is called a mechanical kill. The interceptor hits the warhead and basically smashes it to pieces without the explosives actually detonating. High explosives are designed to be stable. They usually need a specific type of shot from a detonator to go off. A kinetic impact might just shatter the explosive material and the casing. In that case, you have chunks of high explosives falling to the ground. They are still dangerous, but they haven't exploded in the air.
That is an even better reason to stay inside. You could have unexploded ordnance falling into your backyard.
This is why you see the bomb disposal units out in the fields after these attacks. They aren't just looking for metal, they are looking for pieces of the warhead that didn't go off. This is a huge engineering challenge for the defense side. How do you ensure a high-order detonation every time?
And from what I understand, the interceptors are getting smarter. They are using better sensors to identify exactly where the warhead is within the missile body, so they can aim for the sweet spot. But when both objects are moving at several kilometers per second, the margin for error is measured in centimeters.
It is mind-boggling. Think about the processing power required to look at a blurry radar return, identify the orientation of a tumbling missile, and then adjust the thrusters on the interceptor to hit the nose cone instead of the tail. This is why AI and machine learning are so integrated into these systems now. They are trained on thousands of simulated flights to recognize the signature of a warhead versus a booster. They can even distinguish between the real warhead and decoys that some advanced missiles release to confuse the radar.
I want to go back to the altitudes for a second. Daniel asked about typical interception altitudes. We said Aero 3 is over 100 kilometers. What about the others?
David's Sling, which is our mid-tier system, usually operates in the atmosphere, so you are looking at altitudes between 15 and 35 kilometers. Iron Dome is much lower, typically below 10 kilometers, because it is dealing with shorter-range rockets that don't go as high. But for the big ballistic threats Daniel is worried about, the battle is mostly happening in that 30 to 100 kilometer range.
So if you are in a city like Jerusalem, and an interception happens at 20 kilometers, the shrapnel is falling from twice the height of a cruising commercial airplane.
Yes, and at that height, the atmosphere is thin enough that the shrapnel doesn't slow down as much as you'd think. It maintains a lot of its horizontal velocity too. It doesn't just fall straight down, it follows a long, shallow arc. This is why the debris field can be miles long. If an interception happens over the outskirts of Jerusalem, pieces could easily land in the city center or even further east toward the Dead Sea.
This really reframes the whole experience of hearing the sirens. It isn't just about the missile hitting its target, it is about the entire sky becoming a potential hazard zone. I think people often feel a sense of relief when they hear the interceptions, which is natural, but that relief leads to that complacency Daniel mentioned.
It is the most dangerous 10 minutes of the day. You see people on social media posting videos of the interceptions while they are standing on their balconies. They are literally looking up at a rain of supersonic metal headed their way. It is a miracle more people haven't been hurt by shrapnel, and that is largely due to the discipline of the majority and the accuracy of the sirens.
You mentioned the physics of the debris footprint. How does the AI actually communicate that to the public? How does it know which neighborhood needs a siren?
The system divides the country into hundreds of small zones, or polygons. When the radar tracks a missile and the fire control system predicts an interception, the AI calculates where the debris will likely fall based on the intercept point, the mass of the missile, and the current wind speeds at different altitudes. It then triggers the sirens only in the zones that are in that debris footprint. That is why you might hear a siren in your neighborhood, but your friend 2 miles away doesn't hear anything. It is that precise.
It is a far cry from the old days where a whole city would go into the shelters for one rocket. This precision allows the economy to keep moving and prevents national panic. But it also means that if your siren goes off, the danger is very, very real for you specifically.
Precisely. And we have to talk about the psychological aspect. When you have a high success rate like Israel does, people start to trust the system too much. They think, oh, the arrow will get it, so I don't really need to go to the shelter. But as we've explained, even a perfect interception creates a secondary threat. The system is designed to save lives, but it requires the humans on the ground to do their part.
It is a partnership between the machine and the human. The machine handles the Mach 10 physics, and the human handles the 10-minute wait.
Let's not forget the logistics of this. We talked about this in episode 744, the sheer cost and complexity of keeping these interceptors ready. Each one of those Arrow 3 missiles costs millions of dollars. We are using millions of dollars of high-tech hardware to stop a threat, and the last thing we want is for that effort to be wasted because someone wanted to get a cool video for their Instagram and got hit by a piece of the fuselage.
Now, looking toward the future, Daniel's prompt touches on the risks. Do you see the technology evolving to further minimize this shrapnel risk? Is there a way to actually vaporize these things?
The Holy Grail is directed energy lasers. We have mentioned the iron beam system before, which is becoming more integrated into the defense array. The advantage of a laser is that it doesn't use a kinetic interceptor. It uses heat to destroy the target. If you can use a high-powered laser to burn through the casing of a missile or a drone, you might be able to cause it to break up more predictably or even incinerate some of the components. However, for a massive ballistic missile moving at Mach 10, a laser is a huge challenge because you have to keep the beam on a very small spot for a long time while it is moving incredibly fast.
So, for the foreseeable future, we are stuck with the kinetic reality of metal hitting metal.
For the big ballistic stuff, yes. Kinetic interceptors are still the only way to deliver enough energy to stop a re-entry vehicle, so the shrapnel risk is here to stay. The engineering focus now is on better prediction, making that debris footprint even smaller and more accurate, and on improving the warhead lethality so we get more of those high-order detonations that vaporize the threat.
It is a constant arms race. Faster missiles versus faster interceptors, heavier warheads versus more precise AI. And here in Jerusalem, we are right in the middle of it. It is a strange feeling to be a part of a living laboratory for military technology.
It is. But I think understanding the physics helps. When you know why you are waiting in that room for 10 minutes, it doesn't feel like a chore. It feels like a rational response to a physical reality. You are waiting for gravity and drag to finish their work. You are waiting for the sky to clear.
I think that is a powerful takeaway. The siren isn't just a warning of a missile. It is a warning of a complex physical event that takes time to resolve. Daniel, thank you for this prompt. It really forced us to look at the mechanics of what is happening over our heads every time those sirens go off.
It is a reminder that we live in a world where the line between science fiction and daily life is incredibly thin. These systems are doing things that would have been unthinkable 30 years ago. The fact that we can intercept a ballistic missile in space and then calculate where its fragments will land is a testament to human ingenuity.
And to the importance of following instructions. If there is one thing I hope people take away from this, it is that the 10-minute rule is not a suggestion. It is based on the terminal velocity of falling metal. It is based on the time it takes for a piece of an Iranian engine to fall 19 miles.
Don't argue with gravity. You will lose every time.
Well said. I think we have covered the bases here, from the size of a bus to the carrots on my doorstep. It is a lot to process, but it makes those 10 minutes in the shelter feel a lot more meaningful.
It really does. And for those listening who want to dive deeper into the specific systems, definitely check out our archive. We have been doing this for over 900 episodes now, and we have covered everything from the engineering of safe rooms in episode 892 to the specifics of the Iranian missile arsenal in episode 918.
You can find all of those and more at our website, myweirdprompts.com. We have a full search feature there so you can look up any of these technical terms or episode numbers we have mentioned today.
And if you are enjoying these deep dives, please take a moment to leave us a review on your podcast app or on Spotify. It really does help the show grow and helps other curious people find us. We appreciate every single one of you who listens and engages with these topics.
Especially the ones living through it with us here in Israel. Stay safe, stay in your shelters for the full 10 minutes, and keep asking those great questions.
This has been My Weird Prompts. I'm Herman Poppleberry.
And I'm Corn Poppleberry. Thanks to Daniel for the prompt, and thanks to all of you for listening. We'll catch you in the next one.
Stay curious, everyone. Goodbye for now.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts, that's the close from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My weird prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep